What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Spirit of Music podcast. Today, I wanted to take some time to share a little bit about my own spiritual awakening and really the pivotal moments that led me to this place where I even wanted to start a podcast like this. If you know me, I'm somebody that probably appears to be really social and, surrounded by a lot of people, a lot of community, but truthfully, I'm a pretty internal, introverted person when it comes to telling my own stories and sharing my own really personal details. I just keep my cards a little closer to my chest. I've learned that, and I have found that it's the way to help me keep things really sacred and close. So today I'm going out on a limb in order to be brave and share a little bit more about my own spiritual journey, which I've really never talked about publicly. Growing up as a kid, I feel like I always had an inclination towards spirituality, but I was unsure how to define it. I didn't know how to talk about it. I grew up in a household that was not religious, that was never really a part of the norms of the household. It was a very pragmatic and practical household and didn't really deal with anything that had to do with spirituality or, things that were esoteric or even sort of beyond the practical and pragmatic. And so for me, music ended up being a huge refuge, and so was nature. Nature still is to this day really my first birthplace and connection to the divine. And at the time as a kid, I just thought I loved being in it. I loved the way that it made me feel. I, loved that my nervous system was reset instantly, although I wouldn't have used that language as a kid. But it was really the place that taught me about a divine kind of peace and perfection and beauty that exists. I always knew in my spirit that there was something greater. There was something greater going on. I could feel it when I would play music. I could feel it when I would go into nature. But again, I didn't know how to call that spirituality. And I wouldn't have used, the word God per se. The name of this podcast is The Spirit of Music. And I really intentionally want this to be a place that's not about a specific religion. I want it to be more expansive than religion or a specific belief system or pattern, but really just an acknowledgement of the divine presence and the larger essence and architect and creative force that flows through all things, that no matter where you live on the planet, no matter what you believe, that I hope that we can all recognize that there's a greater force running through all things. And so that's where my story begins, actually. Throughout my life, I had a bunch of highs and lows and moments that really were pivotal for me. But for me, in particular, really January 1st of 2020, which is so wild to say because, most people just associate that with COVID, but this was actually pre-COVID. This was just at the top of 2020. Really, my world began to fall apart. And I had a steady set of dominoes that just fell one after the other. And everything ranging from home life to work life to school life to personal life. And I experienced a number of betrayals that were really heartbreaking for me. It was betrayals from with people that were very close to me, people that I deeply trusted, and people that I'd poured a lot of my time and energy and life force and essence into. And I share that not to cast blame, but really that became a catalyst and kind of a breakdown moment for me, where the grief I experienced as a result of all of these betrayals and losses and huge disappointments, huge, enormous life disappointments, where I began to disengage with the status quo. My life was no longer following the norm of the status quo. And I was really trying to find ways to manage my grief. And it got to the point where I called my mom and I said, I feel like I have put my finger in an electric socket. I'm not sure what's going on with my body, but it's like my nervous system is shutting down. I'm going into fight or flight, and I can't turn my body off of fight or flight. And those of you that know me know that there's been some like physical manifestations in my body that were reoccurring. I still deal with some of them, but I don't claim that. That were a result of just really deep nervous system trauma. And so, although that was incredibly hard, what ended up happening is that all of this stuff brought me to my knees, quite literally. I was upstairs in my home one day, deep in grief, and I kneeled down on the floor and put my face to the floor and just felt like I was being pressed to the floor and, sobbing my eyes out and just saying, like, why is this going on? I don't understand. And, at that point, I'd really lost hope in humanity. I'd lost hope in the goodness of people. It was like my brain broke. Something in me felt like this world as I know it is no longer the same. I don't understand the order of things. And that moment, having my face pressed to the floor, was so important. And I remember in my mind's eye seeing this little, what do we call them? It was this little sprout, like when you first see a plant coming up, that single sprout that weaves its way up. And I saw this kind of like white, electric, soft green sprout. It was backlit, it was lit from inside, and it just kept waving in my mind's eye, just right here in front of me. And I heard a voice say, who you are in your core, in your essence, can never be destroyed. That is eternal. And I heard it clear as day. And I sat with it. And I remember thinking, my God, I've been stripped down to the bone. I mean, stripped down beyond the bone to my essence, my core, the place where there's no Cava, there's no ego, there's no sense of self, there's no friendships, belongings, roles, titles. It's really just the energetic imprint and essence of who I am. And to know that that could never be destroyed, that was the eternal part of my soul that carried through no matter what I go through, was a pivotal moment. And so from that place, it didn't erase all the grief, it didn't erase the sadness right away, but it helped me understand that it was for a purpose, that something was happening to me. I was being cultivated in some way. Oftentimes people talk about this phase that people go through as the dark night of the soul. If you're not familiar with that term, it's really a moment in someone's life, a tower moment where everything falls apart, where you are just getting the perfect life formula, where your world is turned upside down. And oftentimes in that moment, we have a reckoning, a soul reckoning, where we have to really understand what next path we're going to choose. And for me, I decided that I was going to build myself from the inside out again. Now with some new learnings, some of them that I didn't want to learn, greater level of discernment, some better boundaries, but also a greater nervous system attunement. And so it became non-negotiable for me to remove all kind of stressors from my life, mental stressors, emotional stressors, relationship stressors. And I spent the next year or two in so much silence. And if you know me, or if you're somebody that loves art and music, usually I would have music playing throughout the house, but I actually couldn't listen to music because all of a sudden I was so stripped bare that I couldn't bear music because I could feel it penetrate my heart immediately. It was like there was a direct line between music and my heart in a way that it hadn't quite been there before. I loved it and I'd known it had opened me up and I would feel all the feelings and the body chills. But this was different. Music felt like information and a way to better understand my heart landscape. And I wasn't ready yet. I just was still recovering from just being stripped. And so I ended up spending this year in silence. Really beautiful, intentional, important silence. And I want to just say, when you've gone through nervous system trauma, any kind of trauma, but particularly something that jars your nervous system, silence can be golden. Just totally removing all stimuli and input and reorienting your senses back around them can really, really help you, number one, understand what kind of inputs feel good and don't feel good. You become your own barometer. You become the most knowledgeable source and advisor to yourself. It's just a really helpful tool. So that's what I started with. I started with silence. And next, the only thing that I could hear that felt okay in my body and in my nervous system was the human voice speaking, but it needed to be a particular timbre of voice. And I began to become really discerning about the human voice and what kind of voice imprint it had. What kind of voice sounded authentic speaking, what kind of voice sounded stressed or concerned or worried or whatever, the myriad of things that we have. And I came to understand that our soul imprint is on our human voice. And there are ways in which we can use our human voice to really embody something profound. We can stir something within us and others with the human voice. And so I actually started listening to channelers. And for those of you that don't know what channeling is, feel free to look it up, or you can ask me on the side and I'll share some of the places that I began. But it's essentially human beings that are able to channel the divine. And it was less about the person channeling, it was more about the message and whether or not both the tone of their voice and the words they were speaking and the energy behind those words landed on me. And I could feel them putting my heart, my soul, my energy body back together bit by bit with every message. And so that's all I listened to. Day in, day out, I would wake up to it. I would go to sleep with it. I would play it throughout the day. And slowly, I was able to regain the ability to receive auditory stimulation through just the human voice. So thank you for listening to my story. I don't know if I got it all covered, but this is what I've got for this moment. And I appreciate you all. If you feel inspired to join this community, I will be putting out videos. Some of them will be just me talking. Some of them will be conversations with other people. And let's learn and grow together. All right. Thank you.